Welcome to the Stoned Heen View, a podcast series which interviews a range of sport club representatives and leading professional sport club personnel during the COVID-19 shutdown period. We find out what these people are doing during the current health crisis with some of our most popular sports seasons postponed. I'm Mark Heenan, and today I'm also going to speak to a special guest, but a little bit of an update. The Stoned Heen View will be bringing out a new edition very shortly, which is the Stoned Heen View Business Edition. Now, we've had a few changes. Mark Stone obviously joined us last year, so we're going to have a few changes to our banner, and we're going to get some changes done over the next week. And thanks to Jared Whitcomb from Drysdale Media, I should say, who's going to be helping with that. So looking forward to that and looking forward to a new fresh look. Today, I'm going to speak to a special guest from the Leopold Cricket Club. He's a former club president, and he's also the author of the Leopold Cricket Club's Our Baggy Red book, which celebrates the club's 70-year history from 1948 to 1949 to 2018-2019. His name is Darren Barmby, and Darren Barmby joins us on the Stoned Heen View podcast for episode 48. Welcome.
Thanks, Mark. It's nice to be on the podcast as opposed to pounding the pavement while I'm listening to the podcast.
We're going to talk to you about that, about what sort of activities you've been doing, Darren, in the space of, I suppose, the aspect of, pounding the pavement, as in when Premier said you couldn't go that far last year, and how people got some mental exercise and went outside and I suppose had to stay in their zones in some ways and couldn't travel too far, not just interstate. So, and I know that you're someone that likes to travel as well, so we're going to talk about those impacts as well. I just wanted to ask, you've been someone that's been a proud historian of the Leopold Cricket Club and, a player that's played for many years and that you've come to the club. I mean, one thing that why we wanted to get you on was to talk a little bit about the history of the club, but I guess in some ways, for someone that has had so much experience on the cricket field and also off the field, how do you accept that this season has gone ahead and knowing not so much the challenges you faced, but some of the things that you had to do differently getting onto the cricket field, and how did that structure up with you?
I guess for me, at the back end of my career, every game or every opportunity to get back out in the field is great fun, and I look at it that way. So last year was probably the first year in many that I'd had a few weeks off and decided to just take a little bit of a step back with my wife from committee roles and presidential roles, and of course writing the book was an 18-month process. So for me, getting the chance to get back out on the field was really what it was all about. I've always said it all my life, you get across the fence, you've got 11 great mates out there, you play for the club you love, and you're out in the sunshine enjoying yourself. So for me, it was hard early. I think, the training groups, because, the club really wanted, the top 30 or 40 players training in, smaller group to make sure that all the guidelines were met. For an older guy like myself, that made it a little bit harder to sort of interact with the club in the first few months. But once the games got going, I think a lot of the clubs we played were, are great clubs and they're good fun to be around, and protocols and hand sanitising and all that sort of stuff kicked in pretty quickly. And, to the positive, by the time we got through Christmas, things started to get a lot more settled and a lot more like you'd be used to in a normal season of cricket.
Now, obviously, one of the things about those aspects is that on a game day, you are doing the sanitising or you're checking in using the QR codes. I mean, what was the mentality of some of the players, not just yourself, but players that had been playing for a while? I mean, one thing that we missed out, and I've played with you, and I've played with you this season as well. But one thing that I missed out this season was there's no afternoon teas. Going shopping on a Friday and buying, I better buy a pack of Savoys. I better get some saladas. I better get something to eat just to get a box. I better get a can of mother. Whatever it is. Do you understand that aspect and those traditions had to change this season as well?
And I think it's probably on the field changes, but it also affects the club in a big way. If you think about the volunteers and the helpers, and we've got people who've been helping behind the scenes, ladies making sandwiches and afternoon teas, and, people helping out behind the bar and people cleaning the rooms and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got a whole bunch of people that come down because they love watching cricket on a Saturday afternoon. And in the early part, there were no spectators. So it actually impacts on a whole lot of people, as much as, it's made it a lot, it's a different sort of a Saturday. As you said, probably not having you bring Savoys or saladas along is a good good thing because we can actually get fruit and, sandwiches and some more healthier stuff. Yeah, it's changed the look and the feel in a big way, I think. If anything, it's probably disadvantaged clubs because it's taken people who love being around the club away from the roles that they've done for many, many years. And I know, personally how that's affected people like my father who's, been around the club, on a Saturday for so much of his life. And to not be able to do that for the good part of the first half, 3/4 of the season, it really impacts people no matter what age they're at, players or not.
Yeah, and I guess in some ways that also transcends to things that you've done previously at the club, knowing the challenges you had during, we're going to talk about your book soon, about that book phase. But obviously it's not a complete hypothetical, but that aspect of having a COVID pandemic and how you can plan around, getting things done. And I guess in some ways, one thing that I saw, and I played at Leopold this year after coming back after a while, and you were one of the key people who got me back down. And obviously you had your book launch in the back end of 2019 for this book. I've got it here. Don't worry, I've got it. So,
Christmas present. I like it.
I like looking at all the Barmby statistics as well, and the fact that there's a couple of D Barmbys in there, so we just had to, specify which one was.
They roll into one, mate. I claim them all.
Well, that's right. It's all part of the makeup. The thing is, when we look at producing this book, do you look back on it now and think, well, yeah, it's been about 14, 15 months since, the launch of it. I get, and I read some articles from the Geelong Advertiser, and you did something with, you did some lead-up interviews with Alex Oates and Wes Cusworth. The thing is, do you look back on it now and think, yes, it was a big project, and it was bloody hard work, and there was a lot that went into it, but are you so glad that you did it, considering what was to transpire with COVID? Because there would have been a lot of brick walls put in place where if you were doing it during COVID, it might have been an exercise, but it might have just prolonged the anguish of just putting the book together.
Yeah, and I think also at the time, just before COVID, I'd finished with Tess a pretty long stint in roles off the field as well at the club. So, there's every chance that COVID might have been the fillet to sort of step a little bit further away and have it not happen. I think the one thing that, I'm, as you know, I'm really proud of my club. My family has grown up inside the club. I've grown up from being 19 years old at the club. And I guess what I wanted to do was to be able to put something together that allowed us all to remember everybody that's gone before us. So, clubs will potentially write a book about the history and write about the stats. And whilst there's a whole lot of stats in there, for me, it's been more about the journey of family, the journey of friends, the journey of lifelong friends, that as you said, it's been a long time that you hadn't been playing at the club. To come back this year has been fantastic. And there's a whole lot of people, that have similar experiences where they've been able to come back. So for me, the writing of the book was about wrapping, my arms around as much as I could, not so that people didn't forget, but as much to help the 18, 20, 22-year-olds understand what came before them, or help people really understand how hard people worked and fought to get the club off the ground and the things that happened during the journey. And I think even more so now in COVID, we turn up, we play cricket, and we pretty much go home because there's not a lot of other options. There's been limited functions during the year, and it makes it really hard. So for me, it was difficult, but, I had a real strong mindset of what I wanted to leave, not as a legacy, but given my involvement over such a long period of time, I wanted to make sure that if there was something I could leave the club, it would be a wrapped up portion of, 70 years of history that if somebody wants to take it up over the next 5 years, they can add to it. And we've got a pretty strong, history of the club, if you like.
So would you use the word culmination in a lot of ways? Because am I right in saying, did you start the book as in, start putting the book together once you stopped being president of the Leopold Cricket Club?
No, it was in sort of 2 years to go. So we were coming up on the 70th year. We just opened the new club rooms. So it was a pretty, defining time for the club, I suppose, from a facilities perspective, and been lucky enough or good enough to win a fifth 11 premiership. And that fifth 11 premiership had probably nearly 60 players playing it. And of those 60 players, probably 45 of those, some hadn't been at the club for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Some hadn't played cricket in 30 years. Some were in their late 60s. So what I was starting to see was the joy it was bringing them coming back into the club and being around old friends and rekindling relationships and friendships that they probably hadn't been involved in for 20, 30 years. So it sort of started there. It moved into, the opening of the new club rooms and wanting to have some pretty big events. It sort of culminated, the book launch was to culminate in our 70th birthday party at the club. We ended up having that, but I guess halfway through preparing the book, I really had no idea. I'd never written a book before. I had no idea how much time and effort it was going to take. And we were probably a good 9 months after that birthday function that it was ready to be printed. But in saying that, it was I thought it was well worth the wait just to get a lot of the things in it that I wanted to make sure I captured.
Yeah, and obviously when we look at the book, it's 232 pages, it's full colour, as I said, called Our Baggy Red. I guess the thing is, my question is that if you're doing it again, or I'm not saying you want to do it again, you've captured a lot of history in there, and congratulations. But I guess the thing is, by having these, chats and, getting publishers and getting that done, do you understand and appreciate that getting it out and launching it on December of 2019, considering what was to transpire 4 months later with a global pandemic, are you thankful that you got it out? Because those things of doing those external things outside the club, not just rooms being shut because of the pandemic, but it would have just stretched it out a lot further if that was the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's probably two parts to that, is that we had a function last Saturday night, and two separate people came and approached me from two different clubs, one from St Leonard's, one from Drysdale Cricket Club. Both guys I hadn't seen for 18 months, 2 years, but both mentioned that they purchased the book, one because they just love cricket in Geelong or local cricket and wanted to understand the story a little bit more as well. And by the same token, 3 or 4 weeks ago at an under 13, at our under 13 junior training night, one of the mums came up who was a 12, 13-year-old girl with her parents, who are both executive committee members, vice president, all that sort of stuff. And her journey that she saw through the eyes of the club was as a 13, 14, 15-year-old girl. Her child now plays in under 13s and in a premiership winning under 13 team, I must say. But just to see the memories that it brought back for people like that as well, because, her eyes were different to my eyes and everybody saw their period in a different way. So had we not got it out at that time, I think it would have been probably half the impact that it would have had on a whole lot of people, because you're not at the club, you're finding other things to do. I think the success of podcasts like yourself and yours and others, people have gravitated to electronic media. So trying to sell a book, a hard copy book, and get it out to the masses when they're not actually at the club or not around the place as often would have been incredibly difficult. So, if it was 6 months later, I'm not sure what impact it might have had, but I couldn't have been happier for the feedback. And, when you're looking at 65-year-old men who have been around the club for probably 40 years, and they tell you that they were lying in bed reading the book with their wife, and she was reading her book and he was reading the club book, and he starts crying because he's remembering, friends that aren't with us anymore, or remembering happy times at the club. That's really what, that's what it's all about for me.
One thing that really strikes me is that even when you put it together and, you're getting all the statistical information and the scorecards, and you're getting, little bits and chunks of, not so much president's speeches, but wraps of the season. One thing that really strikes me, the more I look at it, is the full color photos, as in of the photos of 20, 30 years ago going back. And I find that really extraordinary, because how would you go about sourcing those photos? Just to give you a bit of a background here, I played in the premiership, not 20 years ago, I should say, for Leopold. And the thing was, the captain said to me, do you want to get this photo? I got this photo. And then he had a couple of copies of it. And then I gave it to someone else who I played in the team who worked across the road. Even if that was the hard copy, it was still a colour photo. And was there a lot of time spent gathering not just scorecards, but those old photos?
I think the whole process really took me not by surprise. I felt I could articulate how I wanted to write it, and the stories by year, and I knew the key detail. One thing that was fantastic was the club's got an enormous amount of old records and old minute books. So there were minute books for every single committee meeting that was held that talked about things that happened on the Saturday, things that happened at the club, whatever it may be. But alongside of that, we are so lucky to have some people around the club that Barb Kittle, Darren and Rod's mum, she's kept so much stuff over the years. It's incredible about her boys' history. My scrapbooks, our photo albums, all of that sort of stuff was really helpful. People like Graham Drake and Wayne Fulton, with boxes of photos, and from a period through the 70s and the 80s that I wasn't at the club or playing at the club, but the amount of photos that they had that they were able to share with us, at the end of the day, we only had to go to places like the Addy or the Record Centre, the Historical Centre, for a few photos. Ian Peel and his wife Marge had a box of history from the 90s when we won the first 11 back-to-back premierships, and the photos inside of that. Colin Speed's another who, had, like myself, every copy of every newsletter that we put out through, 10 and 12-year periods. So a lot of people had a lot of contribution in terms of the visual perspective of it. And then it was just a matter of Tess, my wife, did an incredible job in retyping all the key events. She trawled through every single minute of every year of the history of the club, pulled out 5 or 6 key things for me to focus on and talk about and elaborate on. And then the photos sort of slotted in at the time. And it's probably more photo heavy in the back half, because I guess in the last 10 years or so, we're taking photos of everything, players making their debuts through the 90s and the 2000s, lots and lots of photos at functions. It started to evolve a bit more, but I was really impressed with the way the older group inside the club came to the fore and gave us a whole lot of just quirky stuff as well. There was little leaflets that used to sit at the bottom of the score box. There were some traits and some rules and guidelines and things that you would just expect never to see again popped up in boxes of history, and just made it so much easier for us to sort of tell that story.
So the Barmby house was becoming a photo drop box.
Yeah, it was a little bit of that, and it was also because obviously I've got a fairly intensive sort of job, so it was a case of sitting down at 8 o'clock at night and working to maybe 1 or 2 in the morning to do the writing and compiling stuff, and that sort of went on for 6 or 7 months, and Saturdays and Sundays. And I don't say that to go, oh gee, how hard was it, and I did a great job, but I say that because it was really, it was a big task. And when I got into it, I also realised, I'd pass on some pieces to people in the club, and an example would have been we've had an ex-president through the 90s called Rod McDonald, who was a councillor at.
I opened the batting with him in our premiership.
That's it, correct. So yeah, a premiership in the mid 90s, or president in the mid 90s. And Rod grew up in Tasmania, and his dad coached Tim Payne. So I've written 3 or 4 lines because I wanted to try and intertwine the connection there into the book, into the story. And I'd sent it off to Rod, and he came back with 75 spell checks, and this line has to be here, and this needs to be here, and Dad did this, but Tim did this. And there was lots of occasions where I'd go to people and sort of say, hey, can you just double check this for me? Does it seem right? Have I got the chronological order right? Have I got the timings right, the wording right? And I'm sure there'll be people that would read the book and go, gee, that was a bit honest, or it was a bit open, or it was, because I didn't sort of hold back. If there were conflicts at the club, I wanted to call those out, because I guess that made up the journey. But you'd be surprised how much time went into just, making sure the detail was right, because my memory of what I thought about the club changed a hell of a lot by the time I got to the end of the book. I didn't have a great knowledge of the 70s and the 60s and the 50s. So the writing of the book, the researching of the data, reading through the minutes of meetings and stuff like that really helped me understand not only what happened, but the huge impact that certain people had at the club. That, if I'm honest, 75% of the playing group today, unless they've read the book intently and gone through it, probably have no idea who some of these people are. And to me, that's a big part of why I wrote the book. I don't want the history to disappear.
No, absolutely. And I think it wasn't just what the articles came out since you published the book, and the fact that you'd be up till 1 o'clock in the morning and doing it, but you had to go to the club rooms and source a lot of the scorecards. Very interesting you mentioned Rod McDonald, because there's a Tasmanian connection there, and I found out that he was selling holidays to Tasmania as well. So that might explain something. There you go. But no, it's great that you can sort of reconnect with the people from the bygone eras, and that they all came together in that cause and knowing what you're putting together. I mean, just quickly before we wrap up about the cricket side, I should mention here that you were named in the greatest team of the last 70 years for the club. Did you feel that when that happened, that even though you'd been president and all that, but did you feel that you had to have, that there was a legacy elsewhere, because not only were you named in that team, but did you feel that, I feel like I have to give something extra because it's a prestigious honour to be named in that greatest 11 of 70 years?
Look, it's a hard one. I guess the shortest answer is I came to Leopold after 10 or 12 years at Newcomen District and had played in maybe 7 or 8 premierships from juniors right the way through. And I played amongst a whole lot of great cricketers, and for the first 6 or 7 years I would be fine leg to fine leg. So when I came to Leopold, I had my first game in the seconds and had 5 or 6 catches and 50. And from there I sort of went into the ones, and the career sort of took its journey after that. I know I've had a good career and I know it's been successful, but there were so many people around me that, in terms of bowlers back in the day, the Steve Hills, the Gavin Castles, the Darren Kittles, the Guy Ridgways, the Wes Cusworths, whoever it may be, who were incredible players that brought me on the journey. So, you can be a good wicketkeeper, but you can be helped a lot on the journey, with great bowlers around you. And we just had an incredible team for a 10 or 12 year period that made a difference. And I think the other side is the longevity. I'm 53 now and still playing and still playing as much as I can. Almost by default, your numbers are going to start to grow. And David Ford constantly reminds me that had I played, not played in 5th and 6th in one-day games, he would have passed me in this and that. Yeah, I was lucky to get the results I did. And I guess the other thing is, as a wicketkeeper, during those periods, we didn't have a lot of change. So once you got in the side, if you held your spot, your results and your statistics started to rack up from there. Whereas, I think over the last 10 or 12 years, we've had a lot of change in those periods. Post Luke Murray, it's really settling down a little bit now, but we'd had multiple keepers over multiple times. So it was certainly an honour. There was probably 6 or 7 or 4 or 5 to choose from, as opposed to an all-rounder or a batsman where I think we culled a group of 20, or the selectors culled a group of 20 batsmen, 20 bowlers. So it would have been a lot harder had I been a number 4 batsman. Some incredible players over the journey didn't actually get into that side. Current day players like Tim Marshall, who's had a phenomenal career, and he'll finish up with some amazing stats. So yeah, privileged to be in it, proud to be in it. But for me, it was just part of that journey of, as president and Tess in her role, we wanted to give to the community the sort of club that we would want to walk up to and go, is this where I want to spend my time? Is this where I want my kids to be? So everything we tried to do was the very best that we could do as people. And I think we had a really great period there. Maybe not as much success on the field as we wanted, but the book was probably just a culmination of what I know I want to do and what I want to give back. So, I sort of leave it as it is now with a lot of happy people with it on their coffee tables or in their homes, and bringing back a whole lot of great memories.
And obviously, it's been passed on through your sons. I mean, Jaden had followed an athletics career, but Dylan and obviously Matthew, they're a big part of the club. So it's great that you've got that Barmby connection still involved, not just with yourself playing in the local, but their involvement as well. Hey, want to talk about you're a person that likes to travel, and you've done a lot of traveling in your job. So your role as national brands manager, how's that role impacted because of COVID?
I think personally for me, it's been a godsend. So I've been with ACCO now for nearly 10 years. And my first 4 or 5 years, I was travelling to Sydney 2 days a week, working from home 2 days a week and heading to major customers on the 5th day. So my first 4 or 5 years were very autonomous. I was on my own. I was managing my days, and I really enjoyed that. And then we merged with another company, and it meant heading to Melbourne every single day. So through that sort of period of presidency, that 4 or 5 year period, and writing the book and all that sort of stuff, I was travelling to Melbourne every day as well. So when COVID came around, I think we all got a bit of a shock to the system. I've got Dylan's in hospitality, so his role ceased pretty much straight away. Matt was ready to hop on a flight to England to play cricket in April, missed out on that, and we were heading off to Egypt as well on Good Friday. So everything just got completely turned on its head. But if I think about it from a work sense, it's been great because, it's allowed me to be home at 5:30 when I finish my day, and then be able to head out afterwards and go for a walk or a jog or whatever it may be, and not necessarily, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So for me, health-wise and personally, Tess would never agree because I think she's had far enough of me here at home. But I think apart from the challenges that we and a whole lot of other families would have lived through, it's been great, I think, to get a better work-life balance, and one that I was probably previously accustomed to before than 4 or 5 years ago.
Now, I've heard that saying, we'll have a bit of banter now about pounding the pavement, because you do. Let's be honest, and this going out to the Leopold Cricket Club, that one of the things that struck me coming back into pre-season was how fit is Darren Barmby. He's got the nice tan. So I did say to him a lot of the time when he was playing on the weekend, geez, you better put some sunscreen on. You're going to look like a roasted tomato. But making sure that if we don't have a hat on, obviously. So that's always important. But 2 things here. So I've been in touch with, I've got a few good friends at the Drysdale Football Club, and I've seen some sneaky photos of you wearing nothing but purple and pink, being the runner, and also too, lucky enough to play at Leopold Cricket Club in the first 11. You did have a red panel van, and that's how I found out I got to play in first 11 for Leopold. I think you were working at Dulux at the time around that happened. Whatever happened to that van, and will you be coming back for the Drysdale Football Club as their runner this season?
The van first was funny. Luke Murray, who's a great friend and been a great person around the club, brought it up again on the weekend. It's funny how it pops into conversation, but yeah, it was I worked at Dulux in the trade part of the business, and it was a big red O'Connor van, and we fitted seats in it because the kids had just been born. So we've got this big Ford O'Connor van and 3 rows of seats in the back, and it was obviously the cricket beast. So there was a couple of years where I was coaching Leopold, and we'd head off to the ground, and it'd be like, the first 8 people that wanted to get on board, throw your bag in the back, grab your seat. I think we called it the Big Red Jelly Bean of Love, was the name that was given to it. But I was always a little bit out there, but it was probably the scene of many interesting journeys. Not to mention the drive homes when we'd had good days, but also days where we were playing at Newtown and Chilwell on the main oval, and I'd pull up in the St Joey's 6th 11 ground, the one down the bottom out the back of the college, and I'd had some quirks where I'd get the team to completely warm up in their whites at a totally different ground. Or if we were batting, we'd do our full batting warm-ups at a totally different ground and turn up 5, 7, 10 minutes before the game starts, which, don't ask me why, but this was some of the weird stuff that went through my head at the time. But I clearly remember turning up at Newtown one day and the big sliding door of the red O'Connor van opening up, 8 players falling out of the back of it, fully kitted out in their whites, and Mark Fraser and another batter at the time who were opening, virtually pushing their way through out of the rest of the players and pretty much running straight out on the ground to take the first over of the day, which I'm not sure what it sort of says about our preparation. But there were some amazing times in that bus, and it's just, and again, it sort of reminds me of why people stay around clubs or get affiliated with clubs, because they love it. But that was cool. And on the second part, yes, as much as I've been part of Leopold for 30 plus years, we've been lucky enough to well, not myself, but my wife grew up in Drysdale, and for 30 odd years we've been part of the Drysdale Footy Club and brought our kids up through the footy club. So winter for me is Drysdale, summer is Leopold, and for the last probably 8 or 9 years I've been the senior runner at the footy club. So seen a few coaches in and out at the time, and I guess for me, as you would know, cricket clubs, footy clubs, they're full of young blokes, and they're not, they don't look like 50-year-old men. So COVID's helped to get out and actually, get some fitness base again, lose a fair bit of weight, which has helped. But I love it. I wouldn't, I couldn't think of anywhere I wouldn't want to be on a Saturday in winter than at the footy club, in the huddle, with the players, at a club where, like Leopold Cricket Club, I've been lucky enough to be given a life membership at the footy club as well. So, yeah, I love it. Thursday nights at the club, getting out there. For me, and it's probably why I still play cricket, the book and stuff like that is so not me. I'm, as you would know, the clown out on the field, the guy who never shuts up, the bloke who's giving everybody a hard time. And at the footy club, I'm pretty much the same. I like to have a laugh. I like to enjoy myself. And for me, the weekend is about the release of the week. So, if people can get down, see friends, enjoy themselves, but just forget about the stress of the week. It's never been a chore. It's just been something I love to do, whether it be summer or winter. And it sounds weird, but, at my age, I probably should be watching Dylan and Matt play every week. But I have this burning desire to still continue to play while I can. And the footy club's no different. I can't play footy anymore. But for me, the next best thing is to be standing in the rooms the minute before they're walking out, or being out on the ground in the middle of, a contest, or giving a message that might change the context of the game. For me, you can't get any closer to it. So
you mentioned about, what you did with pounding the pavement, and I don't know if you had a tan around Clifton Springs or whatever, but it seems as if the COVID is, even prior to cricket commencing for this season, brought out the best in your fitness, and you were well kept. Your fitness took a priority, even though football wasn't on.
Yeah, and I think like I struggled like a lot of people mentally, and I don't say that lightly, but struggled early in the piece. I couldn't control everything. You know, Matt had spent a lot of money trying to get to England, and it was just falling away really quickly. And Dylan being out of work was really playing on my mind. You know, Jaden Motherboy was in working at Woolies, so you know his role was getting busier, which was great. But even our holiday and the stress and pressure trying to get money back from that, and everything was just really, really tough. And because we were going to Egypt and it was going to be hot, I wanted to get a little bit fitter before we went. So when COVID came around and everything started to change and the holiday got pushed to one side, for me it was a release of getting out on my own, fresh air. You know, before too long, we're in Clifton Springs, you know, I'd turn up on mum and dad's doorstep in Winnington 24 Ks later. Whilst, you know, I'm probably not running anywhere near like I used to be, I'm trying to, you know, entwine a couple of kilometres into a 10K journey. But yeah, mate, I'm enjoying it. I like it now. Probably at my age enlightened me to podcasts. I mean, I hadn't listened to a podcast apart from yours, clearly.
48
up and before
episodes
COVID.
Down. Almost your age.
Yeah, that's right. I've caught up though because I've been out and about a lot. But for me, it was, you know, I've sort of, regardless of the topic or the subject, you know, there's probably 15 or 20 podcasts that I regularly listen to now because you just get sick of listening to, you know, to the news of the day and all the downers and people complaining. So yeah, I'm sort of, you know, for the last year, I think I'm nearly coming up on 3,000 Ks and yeah, trying to get to 10 Ks a day, and it's been good fun. It's been really good fun. My wife tells me I'm ADD because it's all about the numbers, and if I get to 9.8 Ks, I've got to walk up the street and come back to let it click over to 10. But no, I enjoy it, mate. It's been good, and it's certainly helped with cricket. I'm in shirt sizes smaller than what I was a year ago, and I'm sure when we hit the footy field in a few weeks' time, it's got to help for the, you know, because the footy running is probably anywhere from 12 to 14 Ks on a Saturday, so a little bit more intensive than walking. So I'm looking forward to one, getting back out there amongst people again, friends, and seeing how the footy club goes. But I'm also I'm pleased that I feel better in myself, and you know, and I've used the time to good effect now that I sort of stepped away from the management of the cricket club and things like that.
Well, good stuff. Thank you so much for joining us on the Stoned Heen View podcast. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, what you've been doing during COVID and everything to do with this book, which is the Our Baggy Red, the Leopold Cricket Club, and you've done a fantastic job putting that together with your wife Tess. And
you can still get some at the club, mate. They're still on sale for $40. So if anyone hasn't purchased one yet, or we haven't sold it well enough, get on down to the club and pick up your copy.
I had to pull the club up because I had the wrong price, and I told them behind the bar, and I said, that's not the right price. I think it might have been $29.95, and I said, no, it's $39.95.
No, it's been good.
Congratulations on everything you've done for the club, and also what's to come for this season and football and that fitness side, and good luck with the personal journey with your work. So again, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Stoned Heen View podcast.
Thanks, Mark. It's a great club. The Lions were probably not where we want to be on the field, but there's a lot of great people about, and getting the chance to, I guess, talk about the club and my love for the club has been fantastic. And as I said, nice to be on the podcast as opposed to be listening to Robbie Malcolm and Shane Cuttajar and others in the past. But in saying that, it's been great to actually to listen to some of the different identities you've had on and get a different feel for how others have dealt through COVID and how it's affected them. It's been great.
Yeah,
thanks for having me on, mate.
That's all right. We like to get a good balance of names. So, yes, you can get in contact if you have a guest in mind from sport. You can check out the Stoned Heen View on Facebook and Instagram. We're also available with our podcast on Apple Podcasts. Write us a review. Talk about how good Darren Barmby's hair is. Get on to Spotify. Our launching platform is on Podbean. Our podcast is also on the YouTube channel. We've got a Twitter account at Stoned Heen View. And coming soon to the Stoned Heen View is the Stoned Heen View Business Edition, which will be in a video format. And we're getting a new look to our banner as well. So it's our time now to say farewell to episode 48. We thank you to Darren Barmby of the Leopold Cricket Club for joining us on the podcast. And we'll see you soon on the Stoned Heen View. Thank you.